Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are, of course, your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. You're joined by me, myself and I for this one in this late edition of Last Word on Spurs. If it was for the very first time, you of course can find us on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're across all major audio platforms, we're of course on X, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we are on Blue Sky too. Ahead of what is for many out there a big day. We are, yes, the day of Thomas Frank's first game in charge of Tottenham, where we'll be taking his Tottenham side up to Reading, in which we'll see, hopefully, a number of players show us what they can do, who is going to impress, who is going to stand out during this pre-season for Thomas Frank. We'll also be wrapping up the very latest transfer news across the last 24 hours and also taking a deep dive into Thomas Frank's first press conference as Tottenham Hotspur head coach. Firstly, I've got to say, guys, absolutely overwhelmed by your support for the show and for me personally over these last few weeks away. Thank you ever so much for all your incredible support. You know, many know this show isn't possible without you wonderful people which make it possible. And also, of course, our wonderful regular contingent of guests, which will be blending in for, of course, the summer. And for those that are aware and acutely know of the journey of Last Word on Spurs, we are approaching what I'm led to believe now is going to be our 8th season covering Tottenham Hotspur, our beloved Spurs. And you know what? Through that journey, I think when you all know me and Jason started right at the very start, it was a very, intriguing one where we began life under Mauricio Pochettino on Last Word on Spurs, and we had that journey through the likes of Conte, through Mourinho, Stellini for a period. So look, I think, you know what, the last 18 months, I know many out there has been difficult at times, but as we know, Ange Postecoglou gave us one of the greatest nights of our lives, and we have to hope now that Thomas Frank is going to be the man that is going to take this group of players on and lead us to more success. So before we get into all the latest transfer news across the last 24, 48 hours, we're going to bring to you a glimpse of Thomas Frank's first press conference in charge of Spurs. But before we do, just to give you also a bit of a housekeeping, a bit of a in the know as to what's going to be happening across Last Word on Spurs over the summer and more. Look, we're going to be covering you with every single Tottenham game, whether it's a pre-season friendly, the Super Cup, of course, Premier League, FA Cup, League Cup, Champions League. As always, we'll be with you across every step of the journey with all of our regular, fantastic contingent of guests that we've tried to put on the sunbed, bring them back up as well. And of course, we'll also be opening our community page for those that want to contribute to that and also get involved and have discussions with us. And of course, the wonderful people which make this show what it is. And that is, of course, you, the viewers and listeners that make that happen. And we'll also be offering up membership if that is something that will be interesting to help promote the show. So we're bringing that and more. But before we do, let's hear from the man that is tasked to try and bring further success to Tottenham in Thomas Frank, who held his first press conference, of course, only just a few hours ago.
After getting to a Champions League final, one after getting to a domestic cup final, one after getting into the top four, one after winning a European trophy. Did that worry you at all when you were considering coming here?
I like to challenge myself. I've been that privileged. I've never been sacked before, so that's one of the reasons why I took the job. So I could get a little bit more risk into my daily life. Coming to a big club, there's pressures. There's we need to perform because it is we. It's me, it's the staff, it's the players, it's everyone, and we need to do that together. So I like the ambitions, and I'm everything I do, every decision I made so far, everything is for the long term. It's not about surviving one game or 1 year or 18 months or what is the average. No, it's for the long run. Very good question. I think you need to ask the guys who hired me. But of course, it's big names, and I'm very proud to sit in this chair and be part of the next chapter in Tottenham's history. And I'll do everything, and every day I'll work towards hopefully take this club to new heights. That's the ambition. If we're not ambitious, if I was not ambitious, I would not sit here. So yeah, I'm excited and looking forward to it.
There you go. Thomas Frank, Spurs' new head coach, in his first press conference. Doesn't look so happy. Has anyone told him yet what's to come? Listen, of course, Thomas Frank giving a very clear, decisive update on what he hopes to be the future of the likes of Christian Romero, where he says he's looking forward to the coming campaign. He also addressed Heung-Min Son's future, where that was at. He also discussed Daniel Levy's big statement about the club wanting to win the Premier League, wanting to win the Champions League. He also refused to comment with relation to Morgan Gibbs-White and where Spurs are in regards to that transfer. Of course, we'll be bringing you that later on this show. He'll also discuss Mohamed Kudus getting that deal over the line now. Delighted he is to add him to the squad. Talking about squads, I think it's important that we let you know that Luka Vuskovic has now been given a temporary squad number of 80. And alongside that, we also have got confirmation now that Kota Takai will be wearing number 81 during pre-season. And of course, those at the moment, temporary squad numbers. So when we do get a further update in relation to those squad numbers, we'll most certainly bring them to you. But those are the temporary numbers that have been given to those two individuals. But you know what? Let's wrap up the latest transfer news over the last 48 hours before we come on to Thomas Frank's press conference and give you a bit more of a deep dive into that, because it has been a day on the always transfer front where you never quite know what is happening in Spurs world right now. And one name that did pop up over the last 24 hours, which for some was a bit of a surprise, was that Tottenham Hotspur are reportedly interested in Ilya Zabarnyi and would be ready to match Bournemouth's requested fee of 70 million, including add-ons, if the player is open to the potential move. Now, this is being reported by Luca Bendoni. Again, difficult to know at this stage in terms of how solid this report is. We understand that Zabarnyi's priority is currently Paris Saint-Germain, who are yet to agree a fee. However, it's understood the next few days will be crucial to understand if Paris Saint-Germain will move forward and launch a new offer. Now, Zabarnyi has made 75 starts in 78 Premier League appearances since signing from Dynamo Kiev back in 2023. He was named the Bournemouth Supporters Player of the Season for the 23-24 campaign, in which he featured 42 times. He also helped the team finish 9th in the table, their first half finish since returning back to the top flight in, of course, 2022. We know Bournemouth really, they are not under any obligation to sell. We know already we've seen a number of high-profile departures for them this summer. We've seen they've lost centre-back Dean Huijsen to Real Madrid in a £50 million move. We've seen Milos Kirkos, another defensive departure with a Hungarian now at Liverpool following a 40 million transfer. And, you know, we've already a 55 million bid already rejected from Bournemouth earlier in the year for Zabarnyi. I think you have to question the fact for Tottenham, when you have got the likes on the books, Romero, Van der Ven, Danso, Dragusin, Davis, Vuskovic, Takai, of course now, Dorrington and Phillips. I think it's very hard to see a world in which Tottenham are going to, in my opinion, go in for such a high fee of a player for 70 million in an area where I think, to be fair at the moment, we are fairly well stocked. There might be an argument that Tottenham may need to add another defender to their ranks if they are going to maybe lose the likes of Ben Davis. There were reports, of course, earlier in the window of potential interest from Wrexham. So I would suggest that's one to keep an eye on. We're also hearing reports that Tottenham are interested in signing the Crystal Palace defender Maxence Lacroix, according to L'Equipe. This is the French report that outlines the fact that there are a number of top European clubs also monitoring the player. Lacroix began his career at FC Schahow after 2 seasons in League 2, joined Bundesliga side Wolfsburg in August 2020. He spent 4 seasons at the Volkswagen Arena before moving to the Premier League side in August 2024. He made 43 appearances last season for Palace, helping the club secure a 12th place finish and a historic FA Cup win over Manchester City. Although that victory, of course, initially earned Palace qualification for the Europa League, we've since seen them been demoted to the Conference League in favour of Olympic Lyon. So I think, again, we're seeing a couple of different reports there with regards to defenders, and would be intrigued to get your comments on this, guys, and your feelings on it. It's not often you see me here, myself, and I, but I think I'm intrigued to kind of, if we can, bring out some more of these stories when it is, like I say, in this period of more quietness in the window, and to get your thoughts in relation to whether you do feel these potential players would actually improve Tottenham and go right into the first team. Because I think that is the massive thing that we're seeing now in regards to what Spurs, you'd argue, are trying to do this window, with the likes of course, the move for Kudos, with the likes, of course, for the move for Morgan Gibbs-White, which we'll come on to shortly, and where that is at. I think the key thing is here is that we would like Tottenham to go in and genuinely bring in ready-made first-team players. So, again, would really be intrigued to get your thoughts on that, as to whether you feel any of these players that are linked for the moment are going to genuinely improve the side. One player we hope has got a massive, massive future at the football club, Mikey Moore. We understand that Bild are reporting Dortmund had their sights set on Mikey Moore as a potential replacement for Jamie Gittins. Of course, that sale to Chelsea went through only a week or so ago. They had the injury to Julian Duranville, and Johan Bakayoko's decision to move to RB Leipzig has now accelerated Dortmund's search for a winger. We understand for them, they're looking at Mikey Moore as that kind of profile fit where he would come in, just to be clear, on an initial loan. We understand Spurs have got absolutely no interest whatsoever in letting Moore move permanently. We understand there are suggestions that Tottenham are trying to tie down Mikey Moore to a longer-term deal. You could argue the developments, the likes of Jude Bellingham, of course, Jadon Sancho over the years, Gittins, that might be an element which might convince Moore to make the move to Dortmund for a season, if, of course, he isn't going to get the game time at Tottenham. So I think it's one to keep an eye on for sure. Of course, I think we've all got massive, massive high hopes for Mikey Moore and what he can hopefully do in a Tottenham shirt. I think we saw that at the back end of last season, that when given the opportunity, he's an exciting young talent. But at the same time, we do know Spurs are quite stocked in that kind of wing forward area. And I think there's still an argument that we could even go a bit further in bringing in more experience. So I think one to keep an eye on with Mikey Moore. And of course, we'll be discussing that with a number of journalists across the next few weeks and when it does leave his future. One name that continues to, at the moment, really keep reeling its head in terms of the Spurs fan base and the news that we're hearing is, of course, around Wissa. Jan Wissa, of course, of Brentford. Now, this comes on an evening or a day where we've seen Brian Mbeumo now, of course, make that move across to, obviously, Manchester United, or a fee has been agreed. So I think with that being the case, we do understand Brentford aren't keen, it has to be said, to lose another high-profile player, having, of course, lost Nulgaard in the earlier part of the season, Thomas Frank departing as well. So I think, again, with relation to Wissa, we're hearing that Newcastle United, Tottenham and Forest are the three clubs that are keen. The forward to date, we understand, has resisted efforts from his club to discuss a possible new deal. It's understood that agreeing personal terms shouldn't be a problem, whether that's either Tottenham or Newcastle. Although we do understand, as things are at the moment, Wissa is favouring a move to Tottenham, where he will be reunited, of course, with Thomas Frank, a man that really got the best out of him. He scored 19 goals and provided 4 assists in the Premier League for him last season. It was Vissa's best return in, of course, a Brentford shirt. And I think at the moment, from what we're understanding, they value the player at around the 40 to 50 million pound mark, which if they do get that fee, that would, of course, eclipse the record fee they got for Ivan Toney from Al Ahly. So I think the suggestion is it's one to keep an eye on, as I've said, with a number of these at the moment. But the fact that Tottenham continue to be linked with Wissa, it does feel there's no smoke without fire. And I think many know from the number of high-profile journalists that we've had on the show that these reports don't seem to be going away. So it's one to keep an eye on for sure. But I think that's a bit of a wrap-up as to where we are with regards to the transfer at the moment. I think there's that feeling with relation to where Spurs are at that I know last week when I was away, there was much excitement around. I was being told to not come back, to stay away, because it felt Tottenham were closing in on the signing of Morgan Gibbs-White, in which would have been 2 really high-profile Premier League established players in the space of a week. That, of course, had to be called to some degree when we obviously heard the news that Forest were looking into what was potentially an illegal approach from Tottenham for the Nottingham Forest player. There is suggestions that seem to be indicating that everything does point towards that this deal will get done for Morgan Gibbs-White. But at the moment, because it is in the hands, you'd say, of lawyers and it is now a legal issue, it's very hard to have a time frame on as to when this deal will get concluded. So, I mean, as always, we'll bring you further news on that. We did hear Thomas Frank comment on Morgan Gibbs-White and give his understanding of really what he can and can't say at the moment. We know Frank really in the past has not been a man to speak about other players from other clubs, and he did double down on that in his press conference from earlier, in his first one, of course, as Spurs head coach. So again, I think at the moment with Morgan Gibbs-White, we're waiting for a breakthrough. We're waiting for essentially either side to show any kind of resistance. And what I mean by that is that from the player side, from what we understand, he's trained pretty much all week during pre-season. There's been no suggestion of that, the fact he's not going to attend training or he's not going to in any way disrupt or be disrespectful to Forest as a camp and what they're trying to do there in terms of their pre-season. But we are also hearing the fact that he wants an answer by Monday, because that is when, of course, Forest do go on to their pre-season camp, which is going to be in Portugal. So it does feel that there's going to have to be an element of movement, you feel, in this next week, because from Tottenham's perspective, how long can you stand in waiting with relation to a player that I think for all of us, we'd agree he would come in and not only, I think, improve the squad, but I think just go straight into Tottenham's first team. I really do think Morgan Gibbs-White is that good and can play a number of positions and does give Thomas Frank a variety of options. And I think alongside that, like I said there, the player wants Champions League football. The player wants to be playing at the highest level. We know at the moment he's got absolutely no interest whatsoever with regards to agreeing or signing a new contract with Forest. He's not entertaining that. So, and that's been ongoing now. We understand for the last 12, 18 months that he's had no interest whatsoever in signing a new deal. So I think, again, we have to wait and see what's going to happen in this next week. But I think at the moment, until we have, I mentioned, a sense of some kind of breaking resistance from Marinakis, Forest, or the player, it does feel we're in a bit of limbo with this deal. So we're going to have to wait and see what does happen. But listen, we are going to turn our attention to Thomas Frank's first press conference as Tottenham Hotspur head coach, where he was speaking on the back of replacing Ange Postecoglou, as we know. For Thomas Frank, it's a very, very important month ahead where pre-season is very much upon us. We know that we're going to get a real clear indication in these next few weeks as to the players that are going to be in Thomas Frank's plans and the players that aren't going to be in Thomas Frank's plans. And I think even when we're looking at that Reading game, which we're going to be covering for you later on today, I will say now, we're going to have an indication, even by maybe those first 2 11s that Frank will put out for the first and the respective second half, of what kind of Tottenham players he may see that in his plans. We also do know players are still coming back, so we're not going to, I don't think, see a full 90 for a number of these players. But it'll give us an indication of where Frank will want to play the players that are ultimately going to get some game time and get really an understanding of, in Frank's eyes, what he sees to be the makeup of his Tottenham side. So before we get into all that and more, let's hear a bit more from Thomas Frank, who, of course, was in that press conference earlier and was talking of course, being the Spurs head coach.
It's a big club. You're a big manager, successful manager. So everything, we try and keep positive. But maybe this question's a little bit negative. Obviously, in the time you were at Brentford, Tottenham sacked 5 head coaches, managers.
Only 5. Only 5, okay.
One after getting to a Champions League final, one after getting to a domestic cup final, one after getting into the top 4, one after winning a European trophy. Did that worry you at all when you were considering coming here?
I like to challenge myself. I've been that privileged. I've never been sacked before, so that's one of the reasons why I took the job. So I could get a little bit more risk into my daily life. Coming to a big club, there's pressures. There's we need to perform because it is we. It's me, it's the staff, it's the players, it's everyone, and we need to do that together. I like the ambitions, and I'm everything I do, every decision I made so far, everything is for the long term. It's not about surviving one game or 1 year or 18 months or what is the average. No, it's for the long run.
Thomas, Daniel Starwood from Viaplay Denmark. Sorry, I'll do the question in English so everyone can follow. I don't think you've trained everyone to understand the Danish.
Not yet, but it will come.
With previous managers like Antonio Conte, Mauricio Pochettino, Jose Mourinho, how did Thomas Frank from Little Denmark end up in Spurs?
Very good question. I think you need to ask the guys who hired me. But of course, it's big names, and I'm very proud to sit in this chair and be part of the next chapter in Tottenham's history. And I'll do everything, and every day I'll work towards hopefully take this club to new heights. That's the ambition. If I was not ambitious, I would not sit here. So yeah, I'm excited and looking forward to it.
So there you go. That was Thomas Frank in action for the first time as Spurs head coach, where, as I mentioned, he touched upon a number of different points which we're going to cover during this episode of Last Word on Spurs, making it very clear from his perspective that he is looking forward to working with Cristian Romero. We're going to bring you those direct quotes into this show. He also touched upon Heung-Min Son's future, and by the fact, of course, we know there's been a huge amount of speculation over Sonny and where his future does lie. He did confirm that both Cristian Romero and Heung-Min Son will play a part in Tottenham's first pre-season game against Reading, and that, of course, is later on today. We should see both of them as captain on the field, but he refused to confirm who will be Tottenham's captain for next season. He did say that will be his decision, and he is still yet to decide on that point. So no definitive confirmation that Heung-Min Son will remain Spurs captain, which I think you can understand at this stage, given the number of links away for Sonny. Both, of course, suggestions of maybe a Saudi offer, potentially a route to the United States for Sonny as well. I think at the moment we're not seeing any real definitive confirmation across the board that Sonny will stay. There were reports back in the last week that there were suggestions Sonny wanted to have another season at Tottenham, play in the Champions League. I do think at the moment we're going to have to wait and see how that does play out. And I think what will be a key indication maybe is how much game time Sonny does get between now and, of course, up to the South Korea tour, which you would imagine Son will 100% definitely be a part of. I think, you know, for anybody that knows Tottenham, knows Heung-Min Son, how much he's adored and loved across, of course, Asia in general, there's no doubt that Sonny will be definitely part of that Asian tour. And you would imagine any exit for Son will, of course, come after that tour rather than before. But I think, you know, just bringing in the quotes of Frank on Heung-Min Son, which is quite telling. He said, it's always tricky in situations like this when he's asked about Son and the fact that he's been at the club for 10 years, he's entering the final 12 months of his deal. He said, right now, I have a player that is fully committed and training well and will play against Reading. If a player that has been at a club for a long time, there will always be a decision for the club to take. And of course, the head coach and the guys who are in charge. And in this case, this will be with Daniel and Johan Langer. But there is something in it if someone wants to leave at a certain stage. There can be something there, but the club will always decide in the end. Now, of course, we cast our mind back, you know, only a couple of years ago. We had this situation with Harry Kane where it felt to all of us that Harry wanted a new challenge. It was going to be very, very hard to keep him. And Ange Postecoglou's first involvement through the door was losing the arguably captain of the football club and how he was going to handle that. And to be fair, I think we saw with Ange in those first 10 games, no one really knew Harry was missing, right? I think, you know, we started ever so well. And I think over time of that season, we did miss Kane's leadership. We did miss, I think, to some degree, Kane's goals and having that vocal point up front. But I think the situation around Sonny is slightly different because I think the fact that we saw definitely towards the back end of last season that the Sonny that we know, we love, we adore, the legs weren't quite there like we've seen them previously. Now, is there an argument that in a Thomas Frank system, we may see a reborn Son? That might be a question that we're not able to answer right now until we see Sonny in a Thomas Frank team. So I think it's going to be an intriguing next 3 or 4 weeks. And that's why I do think these pre-season games, you know, to some see them as a bit of a maybe an irrelevance. I think for someone like us, or for obviously a lot of Spurs fans out there that love pre-season, love seeing players back in action, love seeing new signings, you get a glimpse of what the future could look like with certain players that maybe were on the periphery, or certain players that you felt might move on, come alive again. So I do think for Sonny, we're going to know more about this, like I said, as I touched upon, in the next few weeks, but I don't think we'll see any decision really made before the end of that pre-season tour in Asia. Now, it isn't just about outgoing players. Frank has made it clear that he still wants new players to come through the door for Tottenham before, of course, the end of this transfer window. He said, no doubt, if you want to compete in all tournaments, you need a competitive squad, a robust squad. There's a lot of competitive players in the squad, and it's exciting. There's no doubt the club is in the market and they're looking. I would like to speak when a player comes in, and not just about the market in general. I've always said it's a balance, the squad size, how big, how small it should be to compete. I know Tottenham. I know the players. I've seen a lot of the players, but I need to know them one-to-one, need to train with them, and getting an input every single day about them to give me more knowledge. But if you want to compete, you need to use the squad as well. And he was really making that point of how important it is to use that squad. Now, another player's future who to some degree in the last few weeks has cooled and calmed down. There were, again, a lot of reports and suggestions over the early part of the summer that Christian Romero may very well have been Atletico Madrid bound. I think we have seen this last week or so, a shift in that momentum. It does feel that that interest has now dwindled. It feels Romero is going to be potentially a massive part of Tottenham's season upcoming. And Frank described the Argentine as very, very important for us. He was later asked whether Romero would look to push potentially for a move. And he said, look, right now he's here. That's what I'm focusing on. As long as the players are here, I'm training them, I'm playing with them. He's definitely here. He's very committed. And I know he's looking forward to the new season, which I think will be music to the ears of a lot of people. And I think with Romero, and many might disagree with this, I think the fact that he turned up day one in preseason when he was meant to come back, I think is a positive sign. I think Romero is a player that if he really, really wanted to move away or was going to agitate to move, you would have maybe felt we would have maybe seen him not turn up for day one of preseason. But the fact we see Romero in training, smiling, looking like he's excited for the new season, with Frank confirming that, I think that's a very, very good sign that Romero wants to be here. And I think we're in a situation now, and I'd love to get, again, thoughts on this from people in the comments. Please drop this into us. I think we're in a situation now, if Romero does want to remain at the football club, I think we're going to have to now start and commence in contract talks with him. I think what we've got 12 to 18 months left. I think he's arguably on his day the best defender at the football club. I know when you look at last season, the start of last season, there was a number of high-profile errors at the start of the season. I do think, and this is again a personal opinion, this is no disrespect to Ange Postecoglou, and I hope many won't take it disrespectful, that I think we probably will not play as a high line as what we would have done under Ange. I think that will benefit the likes of Christian Romero, Mickey van der Ven as a partnership. And I think we are hopefully going to see the best of Romero that we loved when he was in that first season and a half at Tottenham. I think the key thing for Romero, which we've all seen, is availability. And I think that for Tottenham is a massive, massive thing with Christian Romero. Can we keep him fit? And I think the biggest problem for last season is, I think when you added up the amount of games Romero missed for Tottenham, it was in such a crazy number that he missed that, availability is the best ability. And I think this is a real key season for Romero, where if we can get his head absolutely 100% focused and screwed on, and he wants to build on that Europa League success, then we've got a really, really talented centre-back there that I would really hope Tottenham do invest in, try and tie him down. I've been of the thought, and I've said this many, many times on Last Word on Spurs, you want to build around your best players. You want to show that ambition that you want to keep your best players. And I really, really hope for someone like Romero, we can sit him down, show him that we want to be ambitious as a football club. And that, I think, again, is going to pan out to what the rest of this window is going to look like for Tottenham. I think a lot of people are kind of holding their nerve now as to what happens with regards to Morgan Gibbs-White if we get that deal over the line, which I'll come on to very, very shortly. And, of course, Frank's comments on that. Because at the moment, the only player we've signed as a established Premier League player that goes and actually, in my opinion, into that first 11 is, of course, Mohamed Kudus. And I think at the moment, we know as Spurs fans, we need more than just the one player. I think you could arguably said this, many, many times at Spurs, in my opinion. I think we need 3 or 4 players that are going to really go in and disrupt that first 11. And I think Kudus is a player that has got the ability to play on either side. And Frank was very complimentary about Mohamed Kudus and what he can bring to the side. I think that, again, is going to be very, very key as to how he's going to help Tottenham set up. He's got the ability to play the left, the right. He can play down the middle as well. And I think, again, when you're looking at players that can disrupt momentum, carry the ball, take us up the pitch, unpredictable, that is exactly what Mohamed Kudus is. And Thomas Frank actually paid a lot of respect to Daniel Levy, Vinay Venkatesham, Johan Langer for getting the deal done for Mohamed Kudus. He said, I think it's a plus to have a player of Premier League experience. I don't think it's the most important thing, but for me, when I look at a player, I think, is he a good player? The ability is always the most important thing. If he's a very good player, I don't think he has a problem playing in the Premier League. I know it's very intense, it's very physical, but for me, I want players that are going to come to the football club and make a difference. And that is exactly what Kudus is. He's a very good offensive player. He can score goals, create goals. And that's also what we will work with him on. So Thomas Frank, very complimentary about the signing of Mohamed Kudus. And I think we need more players like that if we are going to really try and build on last season's success of the Europa League and climb that Premier League table. And I think, again, this is where, for Tottenham, the rest of this window, I think, is going to give us a real true indication of what this club wants to be. Does it want to be a club that is going to really try and compete with the very, very top clubs for not only the top 4, but for even further, like we've always wanted this club to be? Daniel Levy has said, not only do we want to win the Premier League, we want to win the Champions League. And, Thomas Frank did comment on those words from Daniel Levy because they're big words, to come out and say that is what the club's ambition is. As the manager, you could argue that's immediately putting him under an element of pressure because for a club like Tottenham to have that almost drilled down from day one, that is the ambition. We've got to give the manager the tools to be able to fight on all 4 fronts. And I think, again, that is going to be very, very key if of course, that we can do that. He said, Thomas Frank, to those words from Daniel Levy, I share his ambitions for the club. A club of this size should have that ambition, no doubt. How far away are we? It's probably very difficult to say, but we should throw it forward and go for it. No doubt that needs to be the aim. What are the odds for us winning the Premier League this season? I'm not allowed to gamble either. So I think we're probably not the favourites. Probably 3 teams ahead of us at least. But we will do what we can to build a strong, competitive team. And that has been one of the key aspects that have come out really of the opening of that Thomas Frank press conference with regards to how are Tottenham going to fight on all 4 fronts, given we know that Tottenham very publicly sacked Ange Postecoglou because he, in their eyes, was unable to compete on all 4 fronts. That was one of the key fundamental reasons that was told to us in, of course, that club statement as to why Ange Postecoglou lost his job, because he had an inability to compete for the club on all 4 fronts. And I think, again, it's going to be intriguing to see how he does manage that as a whole, because it's not going to be easy. And I think, he's going to need, as I've mentioned already in this show a number of times, genuine backing to make it happen. Now, one position Frank appeared to rule out for the meantime in terms of the transfer market is another forward. He was speaking about the options Spurs currently have at the moment in the likes of Tell, in the likes of Richarlison, in which he said, I think the front 3-4, depending on if we play over 10 and a front 3, with Dom up there as well. I think with Richarlison, he's a good striker. I know he's been struggling with injuries. I think he was having a strong end to the season. And it's very important for the team to win the Europa League. We've got Brennan, we've got Decky. I know he's out for a little bit, but while he's still here, he's still an option for us. Maddison, Odegaard, Matisse, now Kudus. I think that's a strong creative front line. And I'm 100% sure we are going to score a lot of goals. So Thomas Frank believing in what he's got as a forward line, which I think to some of us might be a bit of a concern. I think we'd all love to see Tottenham go out there and maybe strengthen still that forward area. I know, again, there's suggestions and no further in terms of, strengthening that we do need to go and look at that midfield area, that number 6. I think that, again, is a key area which Tottenham do need to strengthen. I think we discussed it with Ben Jacobs on our last show. There does appear to be an element of interest in the likes of Adam Wharton, and we've again seen the likes of João Gomez also pop up. Paulina has been another one as well. Douglas Luiz has been a name mentioned. I know further up the pitch you had the likes of Harvey Elliott being mentioned as another midfield option for Tottenham. So it does feel there's still a lot more work for Tottenham to do during, of course, this transfer window in that midfield area. And many might argue that the midfield is going to be a key area as to whether Tottenham are going to be able to succeed this season if they do get the respective players in there. And that brings us kindly to, as we've discussed already on the show, the one player Tottenham have been in these last few weeks trying to get a deal over the line for, in, of course, Morgan Gibbs-White. Now, as I mentioned at the earlier part of the show, what we're hearing, suggestions out there on the grapevine, is that the player still very much wants Tottenham. He very much still wants the move to the football club, despite the fact that we've not seen him break ranks, despite, again, him training at Forest for this past week in a jovial mood, a happy mood from what we can see, a player that has, as I said, not shown any signs of disgruntlement or the fact that he's going to kick up a fuss to get this move. But Thomas Frank was very clear in his press conference, his opening press conference as Spurs head coach, that he would not be commenting on the future of Morgan Gibbs-White. He simply said he doesn't talk about players that isn't his, and he'll only be talking about players once they are a Tottenham player and they are through the door. And to be fair, that's a trend that Frank has always done when it comes to speaking about players and speculation. He's not one to really comment on players that aren't his. And again, he's followed that same line with regards to Morgan Gibbs-White, which, again, for many out there, I know there might be an element of frustration that we've had no update from the manager on that. But I think, like I said earlier in the show, it's a difficult situation when we do hear and what we see is a legal situation ongoing. I think it's hard to ask a manager to comment, even if he likes the player. What position does that put Tottenham in terms of anything in relation to the legal case, the negotiating case? I think it puts them in a very, very difficult position. So I think at the moment, it's going to have to be one to keep an eye on. And again, as always here on Last Word on Spurs, we're bringing you the most up-to-date news as soon as we get it on Morgan Gibbs-White. But it feels at the moment we're not going to get any real decisive update until there is a breakthrough in regards to the legal side of things, or from Marinakis, respectively, or Gibbs-White, or we hear something from Tottenham. So, of course, we will keep you updated. We have had confirmation from Thomas Frank that Dejan Kulusevski will not be available for Tottenham's first game of the season, which, of course, is going to be at home to Burnley on match day 1 in the Premier League. No real indication at the moment in regards to how long Dejan Kulusevski is going to miss for Tottenham. Frank did say he didn't want to put a time on it, but put it this way, he will not be ready for the first game of the season, which to some, they might see that as a blow. I know at the moment we've had, again, suggestions, or further from suggestions, confirmation that at the moment we've got the likes of James Maddison that is still working his way back from an injury. We've got Radu Dragusin as well that is working his way back from a long-term injury too. So those are just two players that, again, we're going to have to see how they do progress as well. And of course, that includes Kulusevski into that as well. And we're going back to Ange. We're not going back to Ange at the moment. Thomas Frank did say that Maddison is the closest one when it comes to a potential return for Tottenham. He's part training with the team, so that is very positive. He's obviously a key player. He confirmed Dragusin and Kulusevski are a little bit further behind in regards to their progress. Now, he was also asked to comment on his history with Johan Lange and how far they go back as a pair. And he said that Johan has done very well, going first to Villa as the technical director and then now coming to Tottenham. He said, I know him from back in Denmark. And in Denmark, you know, it's a small country, so you know each other. If you've been, growing up through the system, he's a very good guy. And I think, if Tottenham are to be successful in the transfer market, that relationship between Johan Lange and Thomas Frank is going to be absolutely critical and crucial if Tottenham are going to get business done and quality business done during this transfer window. So again, I would say that relationship is going to be absolutely pivotal to the success of Tottenham, not only in the market in terms of incomings, but also outgoings. We've heard suggestions that Frank, when he was at Brentford, set a deadline on when he would like players to also leave the football club when he was there, and he would strategically work with the sporting directors at Brentford and the technical staff and recruitment staff there to plan ahead of time when it would come to bringing players in, letting players go. And I think, again, for Tottenham, they're going to have to make a number of decisions in these next few weeks with regards to players that you'd argue might need a fresh new challenge. The likes, arguably, say, of Basuma, who we know has been reportedly linked to Fenerbahce, despite Frank talking up Richarlison in that press conference. We know there's reported interest from Brazil for Richarlison from a number of clubs. We know Everton have also been linked with a potential return move for Richarlison. Again, saying we should keep an eye on and wait to see. We've got a number of the younger players that potentially may head out on loan, like Lancashire, we know, was interesting. New West Brom boss, former Spurs assistant coach Ryan Mason. So again, for as much as I know people want to see players coming in, I think we're going to have to also see potential movement of players going out. And I think it's going to be, again, a very key next few weeks for Tottenham in terms of trying to move players on, because ultimately for players to come in, players have got to go out. And I think, again, we're already seeing that this is going to be key for Tottenham to bring players in. Players are going to have to leave. So I think at the moment, I keep on saying it, it's going to be a fascinating next couple of weeks, and how much really we see of game time for players in pre-season tour may give us a very intriguing idea as to who is and isn't going to be in Thomas Frank's first team plans. Look, it's a bit of a change up for me doing this, obviously, by myself on Last Word on Spurs. Tell me if you're enjoying it. I think that's also a key thing. Usually I'm joined by a guest list, a cast, and we'll be having them, of course, across a lot of the summer here on Last Word on Spurs. But when it's these late night editions of the show, when it's late night news to bring to you, I'm happy to go solo. So you let me know if you're enjoying this kind of content from your perspective. It's slightly different to what we've done before. Of course, nothing will change from our perspective. We'll be having all of our regular post-match shows for the friendlies, for, of course, the Super Cup, Premier League, FA Cup, League Cup, Champions League, you name it, we're going to be there. So, please, like I say, get involved in the comments. Let me know what you're thinking, because it does feel like I said at the moment, we're in this situation where stuff is going to have to happen for Tottenham to really get going in the market and make their moves. And I think, again, this is going to be a very intriguing next few weeks as to what Tottenham are going to do, how they're going to move. And a lot of it will be down to, of course, this pre-season tour for Frank, which, of course, as we mentioned, starts at Reading. That game available for those that are unaware on Spurs Play. 3:00 kickoff for those in the UK. We could see the likes, of course, of Mohamed Kudus making his first start for the club. We could see Luka Vuskovic. We could see Kovtun coming in as well. So it could be quite an exciting next few weeks ahead to see just who exactly is going to be impressed for Thomas Frank and how we're going to see certain players play. That's another key thing. We always talk about players that are going to come in and potentially show us what they're capable of. What positions are they going to play? Are we going to see a change in tact? How are Tottenham going to line up? Will it be with 2 at the back? Will it be with 3 at the back? Will it be a back 5? How are we going to line up with the wing backs, the full backs, the midfield? I think this is what makes pre-season always fascinating as to what Spurs may line up with. And under a new head coach, we know there is always a potential of change. Now, Frank did comment on the fact that there was an image going around earlier in the week of longing for auditions and who was successful in the auditions. And he said, look, I believe that's not only maximising the players' potential and the team's potential, but we need to do what we can to make sure we have enough threats from everywhere on the pitch. One area, of course, is the set pieces, and making that very, very clear. He also outlined, Thomas Frank, the principles of how he wants to play. He said, I've got very clear principles in every phase of the game. What I like to see from the players, and the players, I want us to be brave. I want us to be aggressive. I want us to attack. I think bravery is absolutely linked to dare is to do. If you're not brave, it's very, very difficult to achieve anything. I think it's very important that we take the risk, because if you don't take the risk, you also take risks. So the brave is to dare is to do. I do think that is crucial. And I think the aggressivity, that's crucial if you want to win something or achieve something, because if you're not aggressive in duels, on and off the ball, it's difficult. It's a competitive game. And of course, you need to attack. And he was very clear on that point, that there were suggestions maybe that his football is not going to be the most exciting. He absolutely shut those suggestions down. It's going to be boring football. He believes the club are going to score a lot of goals in the team that he's got. He thinks they're going to maximise a lot of chances to create. And he was asked about the fact that you said you want your style to be aggressive and attacking. How do you do that without losing 22 Premier League games? I do think, maybe was said in jest. He said, look, brave is on the ball, but also off the ball, how we defend. Let's say in a high line or a high pressure, for example, I want aggressive, I want attacking. Those are the three good buzzwords that I will continue with. I'm quite consistent on my messaging, but I started saying I have principles for all phrases. That means also when we defend low, when we defend in the middle, when we defend high, and how we defend the box. I think it's quite important that we do that. If you want to win enough football matches, we need to be a well-rounded team. He also spoke about the case of having Archie Gray and Brennan Johnson in his ranks. We know both of those players were players that Thomas Frank did target when he was at, of course, Brentford. He was keen to bring Archie Gray in. We know Spurs stole in at the 11th hour to bring Archie Gray to the football club. We also know that he had a long-standing interest in bringing Brennan Johnson to the club. He said, look, definitely good to see Archie and Brennan. It was not a secret. You guys apparently know everything. I have still not figured out the information. But of course, when it comes to Tottenham, no one finds out, right? Anything. It's all top secret. So he said, look, so good to work with them. Two fantastic footballers, two good people. Off the top of my head, I think it was not possible without those guys how Tottenham, of course, got through their Europa League journey and went and, of course, won the final. He was also asked about Thomas Frank, his memories of Tottenham growing up and what he was really fond of the club, if there was anything in particular. And he said for him, what he can remember going back was Tottenham winning the League Cup back in 1999, where Alan Nilsson, of course, a fellow Dane, scored the winner on that day. And he said that is probably his strongest memory of Tottenham growing up. And if anyone remembers that game against Leicester in the League Cup all those years ago, one of my very first cup finals as a young boy, that was not a great final, was it? I mean, for those that watched that final and saw that final, quite a horrendous final. But I suppose all the made sweeter by Alan Nilsson's last-minute header to win us the League Cup. And for those that know, back in the day, we had to sing at the time, Man in a Raincoat's Blue and White Army, because we couldn't even bear to sing the name of the manager, who, of course, at the time was George Graham. God, can you imagine if YouTube was around then, social media was around then, what would it be like? I tell you, it would be a crazy, crazy place, more crazy than it is right now. But I think for those on the whole that have seen that Thomas Frank first press conference, I implore you to go and watch that if you haven't already. There's two parts to that. You've got the first section, you've got the embargoed section as well, which you've also touched upon briefly. Two very, very decent press conferences. Or I say it's obviously a one, but split into two, where I think the manager comes across very, very well. He's somebody that isn't shirking a question. He's quite happy to answer the media. I'm not sure if the press conferences will be as box office as what they were under Ange Postecoglou. I do get the vibe that Thomas Frank is much more of a calmer man in front of the camera. I don't think we ever really see him lose his temper. So, listen, let's see, because Tottenham, as we know, as a football club, Tottenham do crazy things to managers. They do crazy things to players. They send us fans crazy, but like all of us, we're in this long-term relationship where we have to come back. We have to keep going. And there's no way of keeping us away. So I think, again, it's going to be intriguing to see how these next few weeks play out. I think where I look at the fans online at the moment, there is, I've said, throughout this show so far, a real desperation to see Spurs really go and bring in high-quality top players that are going to go straight into that first team and really fundamentally change that 11 that takes place on a match day. And I think up until last week, it felt like we were slowly getting that Tottenham in place. Morgan Gibbs-White with the fee agreed. The fact that's obviously now taking a backseat over the next week, it does feel, as I keep on saying, I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, this next week for Tottenham feels absolutely crucial. I think, we're going to all hope to see a really good performance at Reading. Hopefully we smash a few goals past them and we get that confidence with regards to the way he, of course, has, already put an imprint on the side. I think hopefully even by the last few weeks we've seen the likes of course, Jason Cochrane and what we're seeing with him behind the scenes, how he's going to hopefully imprint his message on the team. It would be lovely on the back of that Reading game, which we're going to cover for you, to already hopefully see a little bit of a pattern of play. I know that's hard because, again, you're going to probably have two different teams for the 45 minutes, but it would be great to see already a bit of pattern of play as to how we're going to play, how we're going to set up. And I think there'll be hopefully a couple of wow moments in there. We weren't expecting that. We weren't, maybe potentially really thinking we were going to see that from a Thomas Frank team. Yes, of course, it's pre-season. Yes, we have to put it in perspective. But I think it's going to be intriguing to see how Tottenham do line up under Frank from day one. And hopefully, this is going to be a really, really exciting time for the football club. He was asked, Thomas Frank, about how his first few days or first few weeks have been in the job. He said, look, now is the easy part. It's the honeymoon. Everyone is happy. The sun is shining. We haven't played a game yet, but it's super exciting. It's a massive club. It's a huge club in England and the world, and I'm super excited. Everyone has been kind, friendly, open-minded. It feels good. And the best thing about it as well, it feels natural. Why not? And it's what I have done for so many years. It's football. It's good players. It's them preparing themselves with good staff and make sure we are ready to hit the ground running. He, of course, was also asked about the fact, does it worry him? Spurs have sacked 5 managers during his time at Brentford. He went, only 5? I like to challenge myself. And I think it's great to see that humour from Frank. He could quite maybe go the other way and show a concern or a degree of worry that he's leaving a club with such stability to a club with Tottenham where, again, we do know it can be quite chaotic at times. And I think what we have seen already in these last few weeks is that he really is relying on those key relationships with Daniel Levy, Vinay Venkatesham, Johan Langer. Those are going to be the guys that are going to really have to come together with Thomas Frank to not only give him the money, but give him the players that are going to really ultimately be able to take this club forward. And I think, again, this is why it's an intriguing time as a Tottenham fan. Are we going to see them really push the boat out? We had Lee McQueen on here only a month or so ago suggesting that was going to hopefully be a massive change behind the scenes at Tottenham. Not only a board realignment, but hopefully a change in the financial landscape at Tottenham. We have to, of course, see if that's going to come to fruition. We know, again, through having obviously some of these top tier journalists that have come on, the suggestions around the fact of the stadium naming rights now being maybe closer than ever before. The sponsorship deals Tottenham may be looking at the moment could bring in new cash or new investment to the football club. That also is going to be very, very key if Tottenham are going to be able to change that wages to revenue structure, which, again, for many out there, has been a massive, massive bane for us as a football club. 42% wages to revenue ratio. When you look at the Premier League clubs with the top 20 revenue in the world, that's going to have to change this summer. It's going to have to change, you feel, if Tottenham are going to be able to compete at a high level and ultimately compete for trophies. And I think that is the key aspect to this. And that, again, was a question that was asked about and told to Frank in this press conference. He was asked, is the challenge higher because Spurs won a trophy last season? And Frank came back and said on that point in general, I don't know. I think it's extremely positive that this Tottenham Hotspur side won a trophy. I think you can't get away from that. That moment that gave them that trophy was fantastic. The club deserved it. They needed it. But my aim is that we can hopefully add to that. The first thing and the first aim is that we need to be able to compete in all 4 tournaments and do that on a consistent level. That's got to be the ambition, and that we build towards that, because I think in 2019 was the last season where the club managed to compete in more than one competition. That has got to be the aim. We need to be able to compete in the Premier League. We need to be able to compete in the Champions League, in Europe, and also the Cups. That is the very high demand, but that has got to be the aim. If we can compete, there's maybe a chance that you can hopefully end top, but we need to be able to compete first. And I thought that was a really fascinating line from Thomas Frank. The suggestion that, or the fact that he goes back all the way to 2019, being the last time Tottenham were able to compete in all 4 competitions, kind of tells you and shows you really that, he feels from his perspective, the club haven't been able to do that in this last 4 or 5 years. And, maybe that is laying down the gauntlet to some degree to Daniel Levy and co. Maybe this is a case that really they're going to hopefully try and give Frank the squad that he needs to be able to bring further success to Tottenham. And I think it's very intriguing when you see Frank sitting in that press conference, and probably for him, with all due respect, probably the biggest audience he's been in front of as a manager. He was asked, how does Thomas Frank end up at Tottenham? And I think we heard this from earlier in the part in the show. He said, look, you have to ask the people that hired me. And at the end of the day, this is going to be the next chapter of my journey. So I'm very proud to sit in this chair and be part of this next chapter in Tottenham's history. I'll do everything, absolutely everything, to work towards hopefully taking this club to new heights. That's the ambition. If I was not ambitious, I would not sit here. So I'm so excited and I'm looking forward to that journey. And I think, again, it was a really, really good first press conference from Thomas Frank. Is everything really you want to hear from a manager? There was an sense of ambition. There was a sense of the fact that the players were really bought in already to what the manager was trying to bring. And he commented on that as well by the fact that there's a really good feel-good factor around the group. And why wouldn't they be? You know, the players have just won the Europa League. They're all winners. I think that is a very fascinating point that we have to also touch upon. That different to the likes of when Mourinho, Conte, and Postecoglou had come through the door, this time around, a manager is coming in with a group that have just won a trophy. They are winners. And I think this is going to be, again, an intriguing point to it. We've spoken so long on this show and on multiple shows over the last one Spurs in the last 7-8 years about how crucial it was to get that trophy monkey off our back. And by the fact Tottenham have done that, and by the fact, hopefully, for that next manager coming in, there's been talk of a reset, new project. I've always got the mantra for me, it's a rebalance. I don't think the squad needs wholesale change. It doesn't need 10, 11 players. I think what I've said consistently is it needs 2, 3 or 4 high quality additions that are going to come in and ultimately take that level up of the first team and push us on as a football club. And I think this next couple of months in pre-season, where we've got you covered every step of the way, is going to give us a true indication of what Thomas Frank's side is going to look like. And that starts, as I mentioned, for those that aren't aware, it's starting later today in that first pre-season game against Reading, where we'll be back later on in the later part of the evening to give you our thoughts on Thomas Frank's first game in charge as Spurs head coach and exactly what we did see. But again, I have to say, guys, I want to say a massive thank you to all the people that tune in live and listen and watch this back. You know, I have to say the journey that the show has been on over the last 7-8 years, I'm incredibly humbled, really, really humbled to be hosting, if not probably the biggest Tottenham Hotspur podcast in the world. You guys have made that possible. And I want to say a massive thank you to you that do tune in every single week, that leave us feedback. And again, I'll repeat what I said at the start of this show, that we are going to be opening up a community section on the podcast that will allow a lot of the regular viewers and listeners to be able to interact with each other. We're also going to open up a membership section, which will allow you wonderful people out there, if you want to donate to the show, help us with the running and the production of the show, that would, of course, be a great, great help to us. You know, we'll be bringing you more shows than ever, of course, ahead of the upcoming season with Premier League, with Champions League, with FA Cup, with League Cup, you know, Super Cup. How many more cups can we fit in? We're going to hope we really, really can. So, look, I want to say a massive thank you to everybody out there that supports the show, everybody out there that really, truly does take so much of their spare time to come give us a listen, give us a watch. I think we all know out there, you know, a lot of time should be spent on the back of that Diogo Jota news, which Thomas Frank touched upon. He actually opened his press conference by sending the condolences to Liverpool, the family, friends of Jota, and of course his brother, the sad passing. I think these last few weeks have really put into focus that, you know, there are bigger things than football. It is the most important of maybe arguably the least important things to us, you know, as fans that love the club. You know, we loved, of course, doing Last Word on Spurs, but I think for me, even having a couple of weeks away, you know, with my young family, 10 days away, put it all into perspective of just how important it is to spend time with loved ones. Don't take it for granted. Life is very, very short. And I've always said for me that whenever we come off the back of doing a show on Last Word on Spurs, we all really, really love it. And I think that's the key thing for us, that, you know, for whoever comes on this show, the regular panelists that have been part of us over the last 7-8 years, those that have joined the journey, and we've really built up a real bond, I think, as regular guests and friendships. And honestly, generally, it's been, as we know, this last 18 months to go through, a tricky time, because there'll be times when we've done a show, and especially those post-match shows when they're an hour or two after a game, I've always tried to remain as honest as possible and try and give my personal reflective view on how I call things and see things, and try and bring a balance to the show that I know is hard at a time when there's real genuine emotion that we all feel as fans. But we have to remember that we all went through something incredible only a few months ago in winning the Europa League. And I think the key thing for many, many out there is that we want that to be the start, the catalyst for more. We don't want that to be just another 17-year wait for a trophy after that. We need more. We have to have more. And we have to hope Thomas Frank is going to be the man to do that. Look, I want to say a massive thank you to all the people out there that make this show happen. It can't happen without the viewers, the listeners, the contributors. We'll be with you every step of the journey. If you like this content on a solo level, keep liking, keep subscribing to the show. We will see you after Tottenham Hotspur are back in our lives, back in action in Thomas Frank's first game in charge as Tottenham Hotspur head coach. From me, Ricky Sachs, we have been The Last Word on Spurs. Please keep liking, please keep subscribing. We're going to see you in less than 24 hours. And as always, come on you Spurs.